It's too heavy. It's too long. It's too ugly. They're all wrong. Here is why the R33 doesn't deserve the hate. When the GT-R burst onto the scene, it completely blew everyone away. But first, let's talk about where it all started. When the Skyline was first introduced in 1957, it was just a pedestrian sedan. Then in 1969, Nissan released the performance version of the Skyline, the GT-R. That car obliterated the competition in Japan's domestic touring races, winning 52 races in its first 3 years of competition. Then the gas crisis of the 1970s meant the GT-R variant of the Skyline was put on a shelf for a while. That was until 1989, when Nissan raced back, dusted off the GT-R name, and released the R32 GT-R, the car that would cement its legacy. It's hard to overstate just how incredible this car was. For 4 years, it held an undefeated streak in the Japanese Touring Car Championship, winning 29 races in a row, claiming every top spot. It embarrassed every other manufacturer. When the R32 raced, you knew you weren't beating it, so it was just a battle for the rest of the places. The R32 was so dominant in racing, the Australian magazine Wheels nicknamed it Godzilla in its July 1989 edition. And just when manufacturers thought they were catching up, Nissan upgraded the car and released an improved R33 in 1993. This is one of those R33s. The new car was competitive, but there was another GT-R that burst onto the scene and took its first place spot, the McLaren F1 GT-R. Now, if you've never seen one of these on the roads here in America, that's because under the 25-year import rule, the R33 couldn't be imported until 2020. That's when Steve imported this 1995 R33 GT-R after he imported and sold his R32 and then 2 Stagio wagons. After driving it for a while, he decided it could use a bit more power, so he called his friends at Barnaby to get him a built motor that boosted this car all the way up to 615 horsepower at the hubs on E85. That's more than double the 2.6-liter inline 6-cylinder twin turbocharged engine from its original 276 horsepower. But wait, what about the gentleman's agreement, you say? Even considering that and its true 300 horsepower, we're still talking more than double the power. There we go. You know, this car is sort of the middle child of the GT-R family. You'll hear lots of people say that it's the ugliest of the GT-Rs, and early press said it was too big and too heavy, and had too long of a wheelbase, and on and on. The car was heavy for the time, clocking in at 3,400 pounds. But I think with the benefit of time, all of those criticisms melt away, especially considering the slow bloat of cars over the last 4 decades. Given enough power, good enough handling, the weight argument is kind of moot. The GT-R's handling is legendary, and at 615 horsepower on tap, I guarantee you won't feel any weight issues. Holy this thing is awesome. Holy While the R32 gained the Godzilla nickname, and the R34 is arguably the beauty queen and the most famous shape, the R33's claim to fame was being the first production car to record a sub-8-minute lap on the Nürburgring. That alone should be enough for it to escape the middle child syndrome. Plus, this car is the most rare of the GT-Rs since Nissan only produced 16,000 of them between 1995 and 1998. Stylistically, the R33 isn't a huge departure from its predecessor. They're very similar with a clear evolution of a winning formula. Once again though, everything is built for racing. The R32 dominated in Group A, but the R33 is going to compete in more racing series, ones that require sustained high speeds. So Nissan focused on aerodynamics. The R32 was known for front lift, making high-speed corners scary, according to Kaz Mitsuno. The R33 solved that problem with a redesigned front lip and, to quote the exterior designer, a spoiler-like shape. I don't think we'll see the GT-R bumper strapped to the trunk of a Honda Civic anytime soon, but it did the trick. They also opened up the grille for better airflow for radiator and oil cooling. For weight reduction, the bumper and the hood are made of aluminum, the headlights were made of a lightweight plastic, and the intercooler is also lighter. So while the R33 might have been heavier, the weight distribution was much better. Did you know that Nissan's design department has a division that specializes only in emblems? The first time we saw this particular design was on the Ken Mary GT-R that debuted in 1973. The R32 had just a simple S on the front, and during a time when the badge trend was to minimize badging, Nissan wanted you to know this was a GT-R. The R33's development chief, Kozo Watanabe, wanted drivers looking through their rearview mirror to know that it was a GT-R closing in on them. Here's a fun fact about the headlights. Naoto Shiraiwa, who designed them, wanted them to look like two eyes peering out from behind the visor of a racing helmet. Steve has Nismo end caps on his spoiler, but on the stock car, there's a GT-R embedded on the rear spoiler, but only on the left-hand side. Why? Well, for right-hand drive countries, the designers wanted the driver being passed to see at their eye level that it was a GT-R passing them. And the rear of the car is definitely an improvement over the R32, and you can start to see the styling that gets famous on the R34 with these two rounded headlights. These lights are nicknamed afterburners for a reason. They were actually inspired by the afterburners of jet fighters. But here's something you've probably never noticed. They're not actually perfectly circular. They're actually ovals. The Nissan designers realized perfect circles didn't look like perfect circles on here, so they tweaked the shape until it did, and turns out the best shape was an oval. And the donut ring wasn't a stylistic choice, it just reinforced the circle shape. Group A rules only allowed rigid spoilers, so Nissan just made the R32 wing as large as possible. The R33 entering new races meant new rules, like ones allowing for an adjustable spoiler. So why this Y shape? Well, when they made the spoiler just the width of the trunk lid, it didn't quite look right, so they designed it an overhang to get as much width as rules would allow, and I think it looks better. And there's another clever thing with the wing. For weight savings, they made only the angle adjustable and only the front. They knew something could fail, so they designed it so that it would default to generating downforce so you could stop safely. Take that, German engineering. Add in a 0.35 drag coefficient, beating the R32's 0.40 and Nissan's high traction layout, making the R33 over 150% more rigid, plus improved suspension, and you've got a car that's going to outcorner everything else on the track. The theme of the GT-R has always been road-going race car. So whose opinion do you ask about the interior? Well, racing and test drivers naturally. And you can see that evidence throughout the cabin, like these three badges here in the center dash, showing voltage, oil temperature, and boost pressures. All things a race car driver or a performance-focused driver would want to see at a glance. Now, if you thought these don't look stock, you'd be right. Steve upgraded his gauges to digital ones, giving him more options to display. Nissan's obsession with detail led them on an epic quest to find the best seats for the R32, tearing apart seats from Porsche, Recaro, and racing and rally seats. And they were looking far beyond the basics, so they tested blood flow and muscle movement with two goals. They wanted the seats to hold the driver in place and be comfortable for long drives like the 24-hour of Le Mans. These seats with the racing-inspired bolsters were unique for the time. Then for the R33, they simply reupholstered their winning design. This is Steve, the owner of this R33, who graciously allowed me to drive it today. So, Steve, you've had every GT-R except for the R34. Why is this one the one you kept?
So I had an R32 that I got back in 2014. It was one of the first R32 GT-Rs that came over to the United States under the 25-year rule. I loved that car so much. I kept it for almost 5 years. But as an R32 owner, in the back of my mind, I felt like the R35 GT-R is the end game. That's like the ultimate expression of a GT-R. And so I did everything I could, scrimped and saved and sold my R32 and went and bought the R35 GT-R. And very quickly I realized that it wasn't for me, it wasn't all that it was stacked up to be. And I use the analogy that the R35 GT-R is like that supermodel whose poster you had on your bedroom wall as a teenager. And you just tell yourself, one day I'm gonna get to date a girl like this, I'm gonna date a supermodel. And so you do, you get a chance to take her out and you very quickly realize that it's the girl with the personality that you really want to get married to. And so after having the R35 for like a year and a half, I really started getting the itch to get back into a classic R chassis GT-R. And so I did. The day that I sold that R35, I went online and scoured the Japanese websites to find a used R33 for sale. I found this one and started the process that day of buying it.
So you imported this one, and you imported most of your other GT-Rs. So tell me a little bit about the import process.
The import process sounds intimidating, I think, to a lot of people. Quite frankly, There's a lot of these cars for sale in the United States, so I would start there first. You get a lot of satisfaction bringing a car over from Japan, and I don't think people should find it as daunting as they might think it is. Most people get themselves in trouble by buying a car sight unseen off of auction photos and an auction sheet and maybe some photos from a used car dealership in Japan. Get somebody to go in Japan and look at the car to verify its condition, and you'll avoid 99% of the issues people have with importing.
Awesome. Well, this car was an absolute pleasure to drive. Thank you for letting me drive it. Can I take it for one more spin?
It's all yours.
Thanks, bud. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. I'm Chaz Forster. Thanks for watching.